neoliberalism was a failure. It's a 40-year experiment. Growth was slower, inequality is greater. It didn't deliver on the promise. And I've tried to describe an alternative, which I call progressive capitalism or rejuvenated social democracy, that recognizes that in a 21st century economy, you need a rich ecology, a variety of institutions, balance between the government and the private sector, but also civil society, cooperatives, NGOs, universities, all kinds of institutions. And we've oversimplified it in many ways by thinking about a conflict between the state and the private sector. Neoliberalism glorified the private sector. The private sector created the problem of inequality, created the problem of climate change. We now know that it won't by itself solve the problem, so we know that we have to get a better balance. I think the achievement of progressive capitalism requires first a change of our understandings, the mental frameworks. Those on the right have tried to portray a world in which markets on their own solve all problems. It's always been a lie. The bankers said that until 2008 when they asked for $1 trillion of aid from the government. So I always said it's a kind of ersatz capitalism where they take the profits and the rest of society bears the losses. So we never really had capitalism. We always had this peculiar system that didn't work very well. That's one of the hardest questions that I think it has something to do with the more general problem of mis and disinformation that has become pervasive in our society, the most adverse effects of which we saw during the pandemic when people were saying if you got a vaccine, you had a chip put into your body. And that Spain, again, managed the pandemic so much better than other countries like the United States. But in this world of mis and disinformation, the right has exploited it very badly, undermining democracy, I think. If you can't agree on the facts, if you engage in that kind of mis and disinformation, it will lead to a divided society where you can't agree about anything. So to me, we've entered into what I think is an extraordinarily dangerous period for our democracies. Because if we don't have a strong democracy, we're going to wind up with a world run by corporate giants, Elon Musk. It will be a world, I think, that none of us would want to live in. So I think it is even more important now that we strengthen our democracy and try to understand how these forces are working against democracy and how we tame them. I think we can tame and temper them. The economic theories that say that markets work well all are based on the premise that there's competition. But increasingly we're moving into a world where there's not competition. And therefore the market is not even efficient. We know it's not efficient. So unless we regulate the market to make sure it's competitive, we won't have a market that delivers on the promise that markets have. That the United States, in waging what might be called a new Cold War, has not been doing it strategically. If we were really waging a new Cold War, we should be doing things like helping developing countries and emerging markets. We should have made sure that they had access to the vaccines. We shouldn't have supported vaccine apartheid. We should be helping them with their infrastructure, responding to climate change. So we have this very peculiar stance where we're engaging in policies that are not designed to win the Cold War, even as our rhetoric gets higher. So to me, if we are going to engage in this kind of antagonistic policy, we need to think a little bit more about redefining our global strategies.